What is up YouTube, and welcome to this Tenet video. We will be discussing the plot, time tech, and also reviewing the movie. There will be spoilers in this trailer, so this is your final warning before we move into the video. Still here? Good. So just like time travel and this movie, let's start off in a non-linear path and start with the technology of inversion. The whole plot revolves around technology reversing the entropy of an object, which means essentially reversing the atoms. And as in our world as it stands, objects have a set path. This is also known as time's arrow. A fired bullet will always go forward until stopped. But if you can reverse its entropy, basically making it so that the atoms and molecules reverse their motion, then those objects can be perceived to be going back in time as they are going against the current of objects that have entropy as it is now. That is why when at the start of the movie the protagonist didn't know any of this, it looked like people are going backwards when he's going forwards. This forms the basis for the entire movie. A theory called Maxwell's demon or red and blue theory is underpinning this. You have two rooms, just like the machines in the movie, with red and blue. One has things going backwards and one going forward. The door, or in the movie's case, the revolving door, is the bridge between these two time realities, so to speak, and that is how a person can be inverted. Yet, yes, that is possibly the simplest explanation of how the tech works I could actually bring to you. So what happens in the movie? Now, in the past, a young Sator, aka Kenneth Branagh, found a time capsule sent from the future when he was cleaning up the fallout from the problems caused by a nuclear warhead going wrong. His city was destroyed, but he took up the first job and then found a rag of riches because he found a time capsule with its entropy reversed. So that means it could keep going back in time, but in it were gold bars and some instructions. In the future, the world's oceans have run dry and we have, or at least our future, have ruined the planet. But there is a clever cookie in the future who decides to come up with tech on how to reverse the entropy of an object. Now, she actually uses this to create something called the algorithm, but this could actually be used to reverse the entire world. And fearing that it could actually be destroyed or used to destroy the entire world, she splits this machine called the algorithm up and hides it throughout the world and in the past. This is similar, or kind of the fear that people had during the Manhattan Project when a scientist called Oppenheimer was kind of worried that a nuclear bomb would cause absolute chaos. Now, some in the future wanted to actually use this device to reverse the entropy of the world so they can reverse climate change and make the Earth habitable for themselves. And this group in the future actually give him instructions on how to find them all and assemble the algorithm itself. He's traded a life for prosperity and really everyone on Earth at that time. Or at least this explains why he is desperate to keep his wife and son as he is on borrowed time. However, an alternative group in the future called Tenet are trying to stop this, and this starts with the movie's protagonist, or does it? Now, the protagonist goes undercover to steal an object during a siege in Russia, but it all goes wrong. He lets his team go, but he is saved by a mysterious man with a red string on his backpack who seems to be doing his best backwards man impression. He is then tortured by the Russians he was actually helping, thinking that he has betrayed them, but he tries to commit suicide using a standard CIA-issue suicide capsule. But it turns out these are fake, and he wakes up on a ship after being in a medically induced coma. Now, this was actually an initiation to join the group called Tenet. He wakes up and is given the word Tenet and a hand gesture and is set on his way to try and stop whatever is going on. He visits a facility and actually meets a fellow Tenet member and a member of the Tri-Wizard tournament, who explains how objects have had their entropy reversed and moved backward through time. Now, these objects are popping up everywhere with no explanation of actually where they came from. No one has invented this technology yet, and this seems to be like some sort of bootstrap paradox where the people in the past are given the actual way to reverse entropy, but it hasn't been invented yet. It's like giving someone in the 90s a iPod and telling them, you know what, there you go and, download all of the MC Hammer you want. Now, he actually figures out what he needs to do. He recruits someone called Neil to help him find where the bullets are made that were found during that raid. Now, they decide to come across someone called Priya, who is actually an arms dealer. It turns out she sold them to Sator, who can somehow talk to the future and reverse their entropy. Turns out she is also part of Tenet. Yes, it gets very complicated. Right here is where it does get very complicated as well. Now, the protagonist goes to Sator's wife and tries to get her on side. He does this as she is revealed that she is controlled as she accidentally sold a forged painting to him, and he is using this to dangle the possible prosecution on her so that he can actually keep her with him along with the son they share together. The protagonist and Neil go to steal this painting, which is kept in what's known as a free port. And this is one of the best scenes in the movie, as we see a real 747 get blown up. However, in this raid to get this and try and get the wife on side, they unknowingly find an inversion machine, and two masked men attack them. But this is actually one person. One person has gone in and back. So that's very curious there, and it's actually the protagonist going in and out of the machine. This was when they were trying to actually save Kat from the bullet wound in the future. Now, Neil knew this but had to keep quiet, as if the protagonist knew his future self was the one he was fighting, the outcome would be very, very different and ruin their plans. Now, the protagonist now goes to meet Sator, thinking that he's actually stolen the painting, or at least destroyed it. He will actually try and help Sator steal some plutonium that he's actually looking for. This plutonium is actually part of the algorithm, and the last part he's actually looking for, and he says he'll do this in exchange for Kat going free. He succeeds, but yep, this is not the plutonium, it's just a weird device thing, and it's similar to the one he saw at the start. Now, during the raid of trying to get the plutonium, well, Sator actually lets the protagonist steal it, and he watches, or at least is told, everything by radio. He then inverts himself so he can do things differently to try and get it back. But the bombshell hits that Sator is actually dying from cancer. This is most likely caused by him finding the time capsule in the irradiated home city of his. Now that he has all pieces of the algorithm, he decided that when he dies, the algorithm will actually go off and kill everyone on Earth, or at least in the past, or they're hoping. We're dealing with the grandfather paradox. What happens if you go back in time to kill your grandfather? How did you exist? The movie plays fast and loose with this, not actually taking a side, but the people in the future are thinking they would still survive if entropy is reversed for the whole Earth, bringing it back to life. But really, if this doesn't work, it doesn't matter because they've had no option but to try this. Sator now has all 9 pieces of the algorithm, and he has chosen to die when he was the most happy, a time when he was on holiday in Vietnam. This is the time that Kat saw a woman jump off of the boat and was envious of her freedom, not knowing it was actually her from the future going back in time to kill her husband. Crazy. Knowing this, the Tenet crew and the Time Army, I'm calling them, led by Ives, decided to go to where the algorithm will actually be set off, because it's technically already been set off as there was an explosion there in the past. Now, one team will be time inverted and one other will be normal. The protagonist in some stunning shots. This really is one of the highlights of the movie, seeing a skyscraper actually be destroyed, rebuilt and destroyed. It was absolutely crazy. But they go to a tunnel, but there's a locked gate with a dead man who has a red ribbon. This was actually the man who saved him in the opera house. However, it turns out he is inverted, comes back to life, unlocks the gate, and reverses out of the tunnel. Yes, it gets a bit messy there, but it turns out it was actually Neil all along, and unfortunately at the end of the movie, he has to go back in to his fate. Now, Kat kills Sator, and Neil and the protagonist retrieve the algorithm. But there's one thing here that didn't sit right with me. Now, Sator was actually going to kill himself with a CIA suicide capsule, but we know they are fake. So it's funny, he would never have actually died, meaning the raid never needed to happen, as a dead man switch wouldn't technically have gone off. How funny is that? But Ives, the protagonist, and Neil decide to take the algorithm and split it up and go their separate ways, cue journey. But Neil is still in the loop, as he inverted himself, or re-inverted himself, whatever he did. He went through a machine at the end of the, or at least during the final battle. So he has to go and unlock the gate. That's now where he goes. But the protagonist notices the red ribbon as Neil drops the news that the protagonist has known him a very, very long time, meaning we only have half the story. Now, here's my theory. I do think that Neil is actually Max, Sator and Kat's son. It would explain why he's called Neil, as the protagonist hasn't met him yet, so he can't be told, or the protagonist can't know that he is Max because it hasn't happened yet. That's the key to the whole damn movie. Now, everything needs to happen, the cause and effect needs to happen, or at least the effect needs to happen, and then the cause happens later on, because absolute time travel is crazy to say the least. So it turns out that all the loose ends need to be tied up, but the protagonist's story just hasn't actually ended yet. Now, I thought this was actually a great movie, and much has been made of how complicated it is, but literally they say in the movie, try not to understand it, and if you just sit there and watch it and take it at face value, it's presented in a really fun way and everything does fall into place. Now, criticisms I had were that the world and characters weren't really given much time to breathe. We moved at such breakneck speed and characters just came in and left, like Aaron Taylor Johnson, and who were they, where did they come from? Clearly they are created in the future by the protagonist so they can go back into the past, because everyone coming from the future has to actually kind of happen. So the protagonist will set them up, and he'll set everything up that has already happened to go back in the past. Absolutely a mind meld. But it would have been nice to see more of the characters, or more of the world at least, but at least we may get a sequel. However, that is it for this video. Please drop a like down below. Please do subscribe with notifications on if you want more. Let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you soon, and goodbye.